Hello and welcome to the Reviews Brothers. Time to look at some more PlayStation 1 Hidden Gems. We're going through every single letter of the alphabet, and this time we are on the letter U. Not gonna lie, this was a tricky one to find games for, as there don't seem to be that many, and the ones that are there aren't exactly the best. But hey, I've managed to find 10 games that have their moments, even if they aren't going to win any awards, even though I think one of them maybe did. Anyway, how about I shut up, you press that subscribe button, and we take a look at some games. Here is Jammer Lammy, the not as widely talked about sequel to the button pressing paper cutout simulator Parappa the Rapper. Here you play as guitar player Jammer Lammy, who's having a crisis of confidence, probably because she spends too much time on social media. So you spend the game listening to Jammer getting her mojo back by playing the guitar in a series of levels that consist of you pressing ever more complex button combinations along with the music. The gameplay is incredibly simple stuff, but in a way that's fun and damn addictive, and surprisingly incredibly difficult. After watching what are usually some really cool cutscenes that set up the tenuous reason for needing to play a guitar, you're thrown into all sorts of songs, most of which are pretty awesome by the way, and you'll be given commands at the top of the screen and just have to press the buttons at the right time, and that's literally all you have to do. But even from the first song, which features the awesome garlic bloke from the first game with a variation of the song that's embedded into every PS1 owner's head, the combinations are tough, requiring you to use the face buttons and shoulder buttons. You will always see whoever is singing the song do their part first, so you do get a chance to prepare, but really it's unlikely that you'll beat any of the songs on your first try, and to be honest, most of the time when I failed a mission I didn't really know why. The game is very particular on how accurate you have to be with your button presses. If you're even slightly off, then you go down in rank. You can go from being cool to awful. To beat the song you have to end it with a good or cool rating. Anything else and you have to start from the beginning. But most of the time I felt like I did hit the notes in time and correctly, but found it was really hard to get my rank above bad. It did get frustrating and it took me about 10 tries just to beat the first level. And then, I will admit, I got a bit fed up with having to retry the same song so many times. And it is a shame because all the songs really are great and the videos that go along with them are really cool and trippy. The graphics here are excellent and I really like the paper art style. The designs are wacky and the world is just a lot of fun. Also, I'm always a sucker for bright colours in games and this definitely has all that. The controls are simple, though again I found it incredibly hard and I'm not sure if I was experiencing some input lag or if I just wasn't very good. Feel free to tell me what I'm doing wrong in the comments below. Overall though, this is a really cool rhythm game that is well worth checking out. Just be ready to be put to the test. Fighting game time now with Ultimate Fighting Championship. This is of course a simulator for the popular face punching activity. You get to choose from a pretty decent roster of what I'm presuming are all a bunch of UFC professionals, and then you step into the octagon to punch each other in the face. You've got a decent amount of game modes, from just the single fights to tournaments and a career mode. You can even create your own fighter if you can be bothered with that sort of thing. I cannot. And when you get into the fighting, it's actually surprisingly in depth. Each button is an attack, and you can of course block and counter, and you're going to need to do that a lot. This isn't a game you can get through with just button mashing. You'll need to switch between attacking the body as well as the face, and you can do quite a few punches and kicks. Grappling is also a large part of the game, where you can get your opponent onto the floor and pummel them into a bloody mess, or if you're lucky, break one of their limbs and make them submit. If there's no KO or submission by the end of the match, it goes down to points, though this never happened for me. The game looks surprisingly decent, with some detailed character models, and they each have good animation too. And the control is actually quite good, but there is a lot to learn. This isn't a game you can just jump into straight away. You'll want to do Big John's training first. Basic punches and kicks are easy, but you need to be good at defense and offense, which is what makes it really tough. In fact, I played 9 fights and I lost every single one the same way. I would punch people in the face a lot and occasionally even grapple them to the ground, but then they would just grab my arm and break it in about 3 seconds, every single time. It was pretty annoying, though it's because I hadn't learned how to defend myself properly at that point and get out of a ground grapple, so yeah. You need to learn how to play the game if you don't want to be like me and actually win a fight. The presentation is pretty good too, with every fighter having their own intro and walking to the ring. They each have their own stances and animations, and it's also nice to have so many characters to choose from, as well as custom characters. I was actually surprised at how competent this game is. I really thought it would be awful, but it's got half decent collision detection and manageable controls, and it is fun to play. But it's not an easy ride. Time for the stupidly named unknown variable Raven's Ridge. This is sort of an educational point-and-click adventure puzzle game where a bunch of punk kids that are rejects from the Are You Afraid of the Dark TV series sit around a campfire and tell strange stories to one another. Then you choose from a few locations to explore, each of which contain things you can click on that will either show you a short educational video, which may or may not include clues for puzzles later on, or, in fact, you might get to do a puzzle. The puzzles are all in the form of things like word and maths problems, and usually involve you controlling a cursor, or sometimes a character or vehicle, in a very basic game. You'll need to find hidden words or select the correct definition of a word in order to fix computers or guide things through mazes. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but neither does eating a mushroom and tripling in size, so we'll forgive it. You also get trivia questions that you need to answer, and as a lot of these puzzle games with trivia, they're often based on American history, so I didn't know much of it, but that's not really a problem, as I didn't want to play this game anyway. I just needed something to pad out the video. Now, even as an educational title, this game is pretty clumsy and slow-paced, and I can imagine even kids would have a hard time finding it interesting. The variety in games is fine, but there's little to no direction for most of it, and you're just left to point the cursor at everything and hammer the X button until something happens. When you do finally get to a game, they're really dragged out and laborious, and you're often given lots of options, which normally would be great, but here it's all just quite tedious. So yeah, this isn't really a game I'd recommend, but it starts with the letter U, and I didn't have anything else to include, so here it is. But hey, you know what, it might be your sort of thing. Over to Japan now for Umihara Kawase Shun, a cute 2D platform game that I think is about fishing, though it's hard to tell. Here you play as a kid armed with a fishing line in a world populated with evil fish monsters. You need to use your fishing line to catch the fish, as well as use it as a grappling hook to navigate the levels. I've got no idea why, as it's all in Japanese, but it's actually really fun. The levels are all pretty small, with the main focus being that you have to grapple all over the place to find the exit door on the stage. As you progress, more and more obstacles and gimmicks, like moving platforms, are introduced. What's cool is that between levels, for the loading screens, you get a demonstration of the new things being introduced, to give you an idea of how they work. You'll need to use your hook a lot here, and it can be hard to get used to. Also, the physics aren't great, which doesn't help, but they are perfectly manageable. You can attach it to any surface and then press up or down to let out more line, though it took me way longer than it should have done to realise that you have to press up to let out more and down to reel it in, which is the opposite of what I expected. You'll need to attach it to walls or the floor in order to swing across gaps and avoid the water, which you can't swim in, presumably because evil mutant fish want to eat you. Your character moves kinda slowly and can't jump far, so you do want to get used to swinging and grappling, which I've said 3 times now, so hopefully you get the point. The graphics here are great, with some cool anime style 2D characters and enemies, and the levels are all polygons and it works well. The game doesn't have the best variety in level design though, and most of them feel pretty similar, especially once you've seen most of the gimme things in all the levels. You do get boss fights though, which is cool. They each have a certain thing that you need to do to beat them, and in fact the game could be seen as more of a puzzle platform game rather than just a regular one. The controls are the tricky part though. They are good and responsive, but actually playing the game can be tricky while you get used to the timing and physics of everything. You need to be patient with the game, even though the levels have a timer, you don't want to rush, or you'll inevitably end up with a dead child on your hand, and nobody needs that. I enjoyed playing this one, and I thought it was a cool, unique platform game that is worth checking out. Also from Japan is, are you ready for this? Uchuu Senkan Yamato Iu no Kiseki, which translated means I don't have a fucking clue, though I'm fairly sure this is based on an anime that, as you know, I will have never heard of. This is more of an interactive movie thing than a fully playable game. In fact, in the hour and 20 minutes that I recorded footage for, all I actually did was press X to move the text on. Now, I know there are some strategy elements in here where you do have to have some space battles, but I'll be honest and say I didn't have the patience or spare time to get there, which isn't really a good sign that you have to wait so long to actually get to some real gameplay. Now, here's a revelation though. I actually attempted to use the Translate app on my phone to follow the story here, and it was very confusing, so I kind of gave up on that. As far as I could tell, there is a space princess and some space sailor people, and there's a bunch of stuff about finding planets and destinies and all that mumbo jumbo. It was a fairly standard melodramatic anime fare where all the men are terrified of women and space ghosts appear all over the place. In fact, I have to say, the story was actually pretty cool, and the cutscenes are all fantastic, with some excellent animation and incredibly detailed graphics. And this is actually what made me want to follow the story, as not long into the game you see ghosts appearing and scaring the shit out of the crew of a spaceship, and I really wanted to know why, though I couldn't quite figure it out. All of the game is voiced too, and this is always a nice touch, even if you can't understand it. And really that's all I can tell you about this one, as it is all in Japanese, which is a shame, as the story does seem pretty cool and I would like to check out some of the strategy elements. It is incredibly slow paced with more story than actual gameplay. This isn't really something I'm a fan of, as I do want to shoot stuff in the face, but I know there's plenty of people that enjoy these types of games, and I do think if it was translated I would go back to it to play it through. If it looks interesting to you, then give it a go, but probably not good for anyone who doesn't speak the language. Ultimate 8 Ball is a pool simulator, which probably tells you all you need to know. As you'd expect, you get to choose from a few game modes here, from various different types of pool, and then you can choose to play a single match against a friend or the computer, or you can enter a tournament and see who's the best stick ball pusher in the dingy clubs that you play in. Now, here's a secret for you. I actually really like pool games, and have done since I first played Virtual Pool on my PC. That game is awesome. And this one is actually alright, but not as good as Virtual Pool. The gameplay and physics are all pretty solid. The game attempts to be played in a first-person sort of view, which you would expect, and it does kind of work, but sadly you have no control over the camera whatsoever, meaning you can't ever get a great look at the table. You can go to an overhead view, but that's about it. I would have preferred to be able to zoom in and out properly, but hey, what do I know. Despite this, after a few minutes, you'll find it easy to start hitting balls in pockets. You can rotate left and right, though this is really slow for no good reason, and you also have full control over your cue, so you can put spin on the ball if you know what you're doing with it, and I recommend a lot of backspin here, as the tables are really slick and the balls seem to travel for miles after you've hit them. And to actually hit them, you just line up your shot and press X. A power meter comes on screen and you press it again at the right time for the amount of power you want. This works fine, but again I would have preferred a more manual approach where you can pull the stick back yourself to choose the power. Ah well, this is fine. Pressing L2 lets you move left and right a tiny amount, and this is essential for making precise shots. But often the lack of a proper camera control means that you sometimes can't even see the pockets you're aiming for. You've got a load of computer characters to play against, and they're all actually pretty damn tough. The AI here is kind of hit and miss though. Even the easiest opponents manage to 8-ball me instantly sometimes, not even giving me a chance to take one shot, though other times they couldn't hit a ball to save their lives. Now, each opponent does have different AI, but it was still strange. You do have to practice to be able to beat people here, and thankfully there is a training mode that talks you through how to play, as well as all the different rules for the different versions of pool, none of which turned out to be the same as the way I play it down the pub with my friends, so this game must be wrong. The graphics here, they're fine. You do get a variety of locations and opponents, and the tables all look nice enough, and the balls actually look round, which I suppose is a good thing. The controls are okay, but they're a strange combination of being too basic, as well as being a bit overly complex, but they do work. Overall, this is a half-decent pool game. I enjoyed playing it, even though the AI really needs to sort its shit out. This would be fun to play with friends, and it actually lets you play with more than 10 people in tournament mode, if you're into that sort of thing. Check it out if you like playing with balls. Funny, aren't I? If you like your games to be more cerebral, then you might like Ultimate Brain Games, but probably not. This is a collection of some of your favourite and not so favourite board games all in one convenient package. You can even create your own avatars to make things even more exciting. Let's check out the games. You've got sink ships, which, yes, is battleships, but without the licensing. You play as some Spanish Armada style ship. It's pretty good. You've got a grid where you can place your ships and your opponents do the same, and then you randomly choose spaces on the opponent's board and try to blow up their ships. I actually really like this, and there's a cool thing that I'd never seen before, where if you have 1 bullet per ship, so you start with being able to take 5 shots per round, but then every time you lose a ship, that goes down. But don't accidentally shoot where you don't want to, as there is no way to change your mind, not that it's the end of the world. Strangely, the controls here are kinda laggy. The whole thing is pretty jerky, which is kind of impressive that they couldn't even get the game of battleships to run smoothly, yet we have games like Crash Bandicoot, Metal Gear Solid and Tekken that are smooth as butter. Ah well, all you do is press X on squares, so it's fine. Next is backgammon, which is one of my favourite games. You get your pieces to the other side of the board, and once they're there you can take them off the board. First one to get all your pieces off the board wins. You can also take your opponent's pieces to mess up their day. There is more to it, but I'm not going to explain the rules to all the games here. Thankfully, by pressing select on any of the games, you can get a menu that does detail the controls and the rules for the games. Anyway, this is fine. The dice automatically roll without any button presses, which feels odd, and you never really know whose turn it is. And as with any dice game in a video game, I can't help but think that everything is always rigged in the computer's favour. But it's backgammon, so it's fun. Then there's chess. It's chess. It works, but I suck at chess, so the computer kicked my ass every time. Again, if you're good at chess, you'll likely get more fun out of this than me. Then there's checkers, where you move your things diagonally and have to either take all the opponent's pieces or get your ones to their opponent's side of the board and then back again. It's fine, you just select your things and then move. The computer is ruthless though, even on the easy difficulty settings, and it kicked my ass every time, but as a game of checkers, it works. Othello is a game where you place a thing on a board and any opponent things between your 2 bits switch to your colour. Does that make sense? Essentially, you want to make a sandwich to swap the colours. Once all the squares are filled up, whoever has the most of their colour on the board wins. Yep, it's fine, you point your arrow and press X. Dominoes. You put your tile down so the numbers match. First one to get rid of their load of dominoes is the winner. Again, you move your cursor and press X. Connect 4. You take turns in placing your token on the grid, and the first one to get 4 in a row is the winner. I'm awesome at this, and I played it for way longer than I probably should have. And finally there's Mahjong, and I've actually learned how to play this thanks to this game, and it's actually pretty fun. You have to remove matching tiles from the board. It's not that simple, but I'm aware I've already talked too much about this game considering literally no one will ever want to play it. Anyway, Ultimate Brain Games, is it any good? I mean, I guess. It's got accurate representations of the games included and can be played with a friend, so your enjoyment of it comes down to if you like playing these games or not. It's very basic with some very 90s early CD-ROM PC style graphics, but it does what it says on the tin and isn't particularly offensive. Time to hit the streets with Urban Chaos. This is a 3D action-adventure game where you play as sexy future cop Darcy Stern. Your city is being overrun by criminal gangs, so you pretty much set out as a one-woman army to take down drug cartels, weapon smugglers, and even city-destroying missiles. The game is divided into a number of missions. In fact, there's a ton of missions here, so you definitely get your money's worth. Each one is a fairly large 3D sandbox area where you're free to explore everywhere as you're given a number of mission objectives to complete, which range from killing people to finding items and, of course, as you're a cop, arresting people. In fact, a lot of the challenge here comes from the fact that quite often you can't just run in guns blazing, as you need to keep some people alive so you can interrogate them. Or sometimes what's really cool is that you can just sneak up to them, and if they don't see you, you can listen in on their conversations and they'll find out where their boss is, or even where they're hiding weapons or where their hideout is. You'll be running around the levels doing platforming to get where you need to get to, and you can even drive cars to get there even quicker. But I found I didn't really bother with this and just ran everywhere. Thankfully, you get a radar which highlights your objectives as well as any nearby enemies, and you'll be relying on this a lot, as the levels are large and often quite hard to navigate, partly due to some dodgy level design and partly due to a short draw distance, and also partly due to lack of camera control. You will want to explore a lot as well, as you can find items that permanently boost your stats, like giving you more health, speed, stamina and attack strength. Often these are hidden away in alleyways where you wouldn't normally go, but some are out in the open. Sadly, you can't control the camera at all, though to be fair it does a good enough job of staying behind you. Controlling your character is fine, but a little stiff and clunky. You'll definitely need some practice if you want to get anywhere in the game. You can run, jump, climb, shoot, kick, punch and throw, but it's tank controls, which are kind of fine but do make the combat tricky. And the combat is actually surprisingly in depth. You can fight multiple enemies at once and you lock onto one of them, but you are able to attack in any direction, so if you're surrounded, you're not out of luck. Doing combos requires precise button presses, so you can't just mash the attack button. Also, if you knock down the enemy, you can arrest them rather than kill them. This is recommended as you tend to get better items from searching them this way, at least you seem to when I was doing it. You also get a load of weapons to use here, from baseball bats and knives to machine guns. These are all good, and although you don't get too much ammo, the auto aim is decent and helps a lot, but you want to save these for when enemies also have guns, otherwise you're screwed. Graphically, the game is decent. The draw distance isn't the best, but everything is very well detailed and it runs surprisingly smoothly. I do wish there was more variety in enemies though, as you seem to fight the same 3 or 4 blokes for the whole game. Overall, I am a fan of this one. It is bloody hard and takes a lot of practice even to get past the first few levels. I've actually had this on the PC since it was released in the big box, and I loved playing it back then and I still get a kick out of it today. This is one that I think would be really great if they did a remaster of it and gave it some quality of life improvements. Check it out if you like a tough bit of justice. Uprising X is a pretty interesting 3D first-person space tank sort of game. You control a Wraith, which is a future tank kitted out with all sorts of funky weaponry. Your mission is to assist the rebellion in stopping the evil Imperion forces from using their planet-destroying weapons. To do this, you set out on a load of missions across various planets and landscapes where you need to capture bases, kill enemies, and of course blow up a load of stuff. In fact, the game has a number of pretty cool, unique aspects to it. As you're playing and start capturing enemy bases, you get access to a number of units, from ground troops to other tanks. Then you can summon them at any time you want to help out with just a press of a button. This is a very handy thing as levels are packed with enemies and are quite tough. Though you can do a fair chunk of the game on your own, calling in these reinforcements always feels really cool and seeing them appear to help you out in the middle of a fight is awesome. You don't have unlimited troops though, so be careful. What's nice though is that you can cycle through all of your available units to choose the best ones for the situation you're in. Enemies you kill drop items like weapon power-ups and repairs for your tank. Thankfully, the combat is really satisfying here. Your tank is pretty nimble and changing from lasers to missiles is easy to do on the go. You can even circle strafe around enemies, which is always good to do and essential for avoiding their attacks. Something that is a bit of a shame is that all the levels are pretty similar in terms of your objectives. There's not a ton of variety, but the strategy of capturing bases and knowing when to call in units gives them a sort of strategy feel to it, which is kind of addictive. Also, the smooth controls and fun combat helps keep you engaged. Thankfully here you get a pretty decent map as well, which you can bring up at any point. It shows where you are as well as your bases and objectives. You'll be using it a lot and it's very handy. Graphically the game isn't great, the draw distance isn't very good and most of the enemies and buildings are very blocky. But this does help to keep the game running at a smooth frame rate, which is always welcome. I'd rather that than shiny graphics, and having said that, it doesn't look bad, it's just not going to blow you away. This is another game that I ended up spending way more time with than I expected. It's a lot of fun and definitely one to recommend.
What are you doing out there, Race 1? Taking daisies?
And finally, here is the Unholy War. This is a really cool arena combat game. Now there is a story here about a couple of factions, one of which is all about tech robo stuff who are looking to take over a planet, and the other faction are basically the opposite and are just creatures and people that populate that planet. This means all-out war, and of course you get to decide who to play as and want to take out the other forces. The game actually has 2 game modes, both of which are pretty cool. The first is called Mayhem, and here you choose from either one of the factions, or you can just have all of them, which lets you use every character, which is pretty cool. Once you've chosen who to play as, you're sent into a series of one-on-one battles against either the computer or a friend. You choose which one of the characters from your faction you want to fight as, and then you're put in a number of 3D arenas to fight to the death. What's cool is that you use the same character until they die. Once they're dead, you get to choose who to change from your remaining characters. And what's even cooler is that each character has 3 attacks, which can be used as much as you want, but each one uses a different amount of energy. Your energy is constantly recharging, so you might just have to wait a bit before using your more powerful attacks again. Also, some characters are noticeably better against other ones, and this is a key component to the game, as you'll always want to use the right characters for the right battles. Now, it is possible to win any fight with any character, but it can be damn hard if you have, say, a slow ground character against a fast flying one that you can barely touch. This makes the battles tense, and you really need to learn who is best to fight against who. The second mode here is strategy mode, which is kind of like a chess game. You choose from one of the factions and then have to move around a small board made of hexagons. Each character has their own movement ranges, and you'll need to plan your moves accordingly. Basically, you want to move your character onto an enemy in order to battle them, and this is really where the strategy comes in, as you'll need to make sure that you're the right character for the right battle, as the first faction to lose all their units is the loser. This mode is by far my favourite, and it's a hell of a lot of fun. Planning your moves and setting up battles is great, and you have to be careful as your units don't get health back, so you can start a new battle with an old character and only have a few hits left in you, but this works both ways of course. Graphically, the game's okay, it's not the best, but the character designs are great, and the levels are all varied, even if they aren't particularly large, but it's really all you need in a game like this. The controls are spot on, with each button being an attack, and you can also jump. Movement is fast and smooth and very responsive, and you just need to learn all the characters' strengths and weaknesses, which is fun to do. This game is definitely a must-have for the system, especially if you've got a few friends that are willing to play with you. You can easily lose a weekend playing this game. Check it out if you can. So there you go, 10 more hidden gems for the PlayStation 1, all starting with the letter U. As always, make sure to tell me what other games I could have included here. I don't think there are many more. I could hardly find any games starting with U, but hey, what do I know, I'm just some guy with the internet. Now all that's left for me to say is thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.